Another day, another story. Death tolls weren't as high as in other wars, but the losses were significant for the population of the 13 colonies. In August 1775, when the Revolutionary War was still just a few months old, a private named William Simpson of Paxton Township, Pennsylvania, part of a battalion of volunteers from his state, arrived in Massachusetts to fight for the colonial cause against the British. Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. But Simpson, who by one account was in his early 30s, never had a chance to do much fighting. As detailed in a history of the unit, Simpson and his comrades had taken up a position on a hillside in Somerville, when they came under fire on the morning of August 27 from British artillery. Poor Simpson had one of his legs shattered by a cannonball, then Lieutenant Colonel Edward Hand wrote in a letter a few days later. Though a surgeon amputated Simpson's mangled limb, the emergency operation wasn't enough to save him. The poor lad was buried this evening, Hand reported. Estimates of the number of people who died during the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783, vary, and it is challenging to determine an exact figure due to the limitations of historical records. However, it is generally believed that around 6,800 American soldiers died in battle during the war. Additionally, thousands more died from diseases, malnutrition, and other war-related causes. Civilian casualties and deaths among British and other involved forces further increased the total number of deaths, though the exact numbers are difficult to pin down. The legacy of liberty followed the journey of a family through multiple generations, each member playing a significant role in different aspects of the Revolutionary War. Explore how the ideals of liberty, freedom, and independence are passed down from one generation to the next, shaping their destinies and leaving a lasting legacy on the emerging nation. In the shadows of history, tell the story of a group of ordinary citizens living in a small town during the Revolutionary War. Unbeknownst to their neighbors, they form a secret society dedicated to supporting the revolutionary cause. Explore their clandestine activities, the risks they face, and the impact their actions have on the larger war effort. The Redcoats' Redemption focus on a British soldier who becomes disillusioned with the harsh realities of war and questions the motives of the Crown. After witnessing the suffering of both American colonists and fellow soldiers, he deserts the British Army and joins forces with the American revolutionaries. Follow his journey of redemption, as he fights alongside those he once considered enemies, seeking to make amends for his past actions. The Artisans' Rebellion explore the story of a skilled artisan, such as a blacksmith or silversmith, who becomes deeply involved in the revolutionary movement. Through their craftsmanship, they contribute to the war effort by creating essential tools, weapons, and strategic devices. This story could highlight the crucial role played by craftsmen and inventors in supporting the revolutionary cause. The Underground Railroad focus on the experiences of a group of slaves who seize the opportunity presented by the chaos of war to escape captivity. Their perilous journey to freedom parallels the Revolutionary War, as they navigate dangerous terrain, encounter allies and enemies, and ultimately find refuge in a community of abolitionists and sympathizers. This story could highlight the intersectionality of the fight for independence and the fight against slavery. The Battle Within explore the internal conflicts faced by individuals who are torn between their loyalty to the Crown and their sympathies for the revolutionary ideals. This story could delve into the psychological struggles, moral dilemmas, and personal sacrifices of characters who grapple with their sense of duty and their evolving beliefs in the midst of war. The Forgotten Hero explore the story of a lesser-known figure from the Revolutionary War, perhaps a woman, an African American, or a Native American, whose contributions to the war effort have been overshadowed by more prominent historical figures. This story could shed light on their struggles, sacrifices, and the impact they had on the outcome of the war. Through the eyes of a spy, follow the life of a spy working for one of the factions during the Revolutionary War. Delve into the world of espionage, secrecy, and danger as the protagonist navigates the complexities of gathering information, forming alliances, and maintaining their cover amidst the chaos of war. A Soldier's Journey trace the experiences of a young recruit who joins the Continental Army with dreams of glory and adventure. Through their eyes, depict the realities of war, the camaraderie among soldiers, the horrors of battle, and the personal transformation that occurs as they witness the harsh realities of conflict. Love in the Time of Revolution, tell a love story set against the backdrop of the Revolutionary War. Explore the challenges faced by couples separated by war, the sacrifices they make for love and freedom, and the resilience of their relationships amidst the uncertainties of the Revolutionary era. The Traitor's Dilemma: create a narrative centered around a character torn between loyalty to their homeland and sympathies for the revolutionary cause. Explore the moral dilemmas, internal conflicts, and risks faced by individuals who grapple with the decision to betray their own side for what they believe is a greater good. A Nation Reborn: craft a story that explores the aftermath of the Revolutionary War, focusing on the challenges faced by the newly formed United States. Dive into the complexities of building a nation from the ground up, drafting a constitution, and establishing a government while dealing with internal dissent, economic struggles, and the aftermath of war. Remember to research the historical context thoroughly to create a compelling and accurate narrative, capturing the essence of the Revolutionary War era while weaving in the fictional elements of your story. American death toll. Simpson was one of the 25,534 American combatants who lost their lives in the 8-year armed conflict, according to historian Howard H. Peckham's 1974 book The Toll of Independence, widely regarded as the most accurate accounting of the death toll. But surprisingly, only about 27% of Americans actually died in battle, as Simpson did. Musket, cannonballs and sabers weren't as big of a threat to survival as diseases that spread through Continental Army camps and the prison ships that British forces used to confine American POWs. Peckham, who meticulously gathered data on reports on 1,331 land engagements and 215 naval engagements, found that 8,624 American fighters were killed in battle. He also estimated that another 10,000 died in camp, and 8,500 perished while being held in captivity. British death toll? It's unclear how many the British side lost, though the American Battlefield Trust, citing what it cautions as unreliable imperial data, puts the number of total British casualties, deaths, injuries, men who went missing in action or were captured, at 24,000. Approximately 7,500 Hessian mercenaries died in the war as well, according to the Trust. Significant losses, for small population. In raw numbers, the Revolutionary War's death toll may not seem that high. The number of American military deaths in the Revolution is dwarfed by the total of 500,000 who died on the Union and Confederate sides in the Civil War, and is far smaller than the toll in World War I and World War II, the Korean War and the Vietnam War as well, according to U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs figures. But because the population of the 13 colonies was only 2.5 million in 1776, the loss of 25,000 men had a big impact upon American society. About 1% of the population died in the war, explains Michael Patrick Cullinane, a professor of history at Dickinson State University in North Dakota. That would be the equivalent of losing 3.5 million people in a war today. The war's toll left a shortage of young males to work on farms, in a new nation where agriculture was the dominant industry, he notes. Revolutionary War weaponry. Military technology at the time of the Revolution was much more primitive than it is today, and the war was fought at a slower pace. But even without tanks, drones, high-powered rifles and night vision goggles, historians say that the battlefield was plenty dangerous for soldiers. Firearms were a lot less accurate and the artillery was nowhere near as powerful, explains Andrew Shockett, a professor in the history department at Bowling Green State University. On the other hand, musket balls were huge and devastating compared to today's much smaller caliber bullets. The slowness and relative inaccuracy of 18th century weapons also necessitated opposing soldiers getting close to one another. With a musket from the Revolutionary War, you can only fire it 2 or maybe 3 times a minute, and you have to be within 100 to 300 yards to have a fighting chance of hitting the target, explains Tyler Putman, an historian and senior manager of gallery interpretation at the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. That forced soldiers to stand in lines and coordinate their fire, which also made them easier targets. While soldiers engaged in bayonet charges, being stabbed to death probably wasn't as much of a risk as being shot, Putman explains. That's because the charge's real purpose was to frighten opponents, who often broke ranks and fled at the sight of bayonets. Disease, infection posed biggest threats. When soldiers returned to camp after a battle, they were exposed to an environment that was arguably more dangerous than the battlefield, due to poor sanitation and soldiers' vulnerability to infectious diseases. Early in the war, American forces were ravaged by smallpox, until General George Washington in early 1777 began inoculating his soldiers against the disease. But other microbial threats persisted. Soldiers died of other diseases that we see in many other wars before modern sanitation, especially dysentery and typhus, Shockett says. Military physicians in the Revolution had no idea about germ theory, or about viral theory, or care for diseases, Putman says. They were very good at some things. Amputation, for example, was a very professional and fast process. The problem is that they have no sense of what to do if you get an infection, or if you get dysentery. They don't have the knowledge and the tools and the medicines that we do now to stave those things off. British prison ships, petri dishes of disease. Being captured by the British in many cases proved to be a death sentence. Most of the enlisted men were held in prison ships, especially in the New York harbor, Shockett says. The HMS Jersey was the most notorious. He describes the floating prisons as petri dishes of disease, with captured Americans jammed below decks. Worse yet, prisoners were subject to the British military requisitioning system, which, at the time, was still largely privatized, in that officers were given a budget and often had the ability to keep what they saved. When it came to the choice of adequately feeding prisoners, or lining their own pockets by starving men they considered traitors, it was an easy choice for British officers. The trauma inflicted upon the young nation by the death toll in its fight for independence was a major influence upon the American identity, Cullinane theorizes. Because the death rate is so devastatingly high, we get the idea of American exceptionalism, he says. While Americans don't necessarily remember the deadliest battles, what has lasted is the idea of Americans having a distinctive will and tenacity to overcome their adversaries. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.